Kakadosh, Boker Or, Beki'im Bahalacha 6, Siman 167. This is Kuf Samech Zayin, Seif Membet, right, which is Seif 42. We are on day 100, page 237. Okay? Now we're talking about distributing the bread to the group. Okay? So you remember we were actually just learning this at night times. What is the minhag to do with? You already made Birkat Motzi. Who eats first? Right? Can he cut up all the bread and then distribute it, and then afterwards he's going to eat? Or does he first eat and then he's distributing all the bread? So it says over here like this, okay? After the bracha is going to be recited, okay? No one may begin eating until the person who said the bracha has tasted the bread. This is the rule only if the person who recited the bracha also distributes the bread to the group eating with him. If each one already has a portion of bread at the time of the bracha, everyone may begin eating as soon as the blessing has been recited, even before the person who recited it has begun to eat. Everyone remembers this halacha is compared to the kiddush. You remember we spoke about, I do kiddush on Shabbat morning, right? So for example, I'm going to start the kiddush, or let's say it's on Friday night. We do the kiddush. So we do kiddush here. Do they have to wait for me or not? So if everybody has their own kiddush, right? A kiddush cup, even if it's going to be a 1 ounce or whatever it is, meaning it's not a revit, right? What? Even if right now they do not have a revi'it in front of them, the fact that they have kiddush in front of them, kiddush just means whether it's going to be wine or grape juice, something that they're able to do kiddush with. So therefore, they do not have to wait for me. They're able to drink even though I didn't drink. So the same halacha applies here to the amotzi, which means the fact that they're not waiting for my bread, right? And I come and I make a bracha, so therefore once I make the bracha, so therefore they could all eat from their challah if they have a bread in front of them. Okay, that they're allowed to do. Okay, the above rule is true only if everyone in the group has an entire loaf or roll to eat, or if everyone, including the person saying the bracha, has sliced bread. But if the person saying the bracha has a whole loaf, meaning an entire loaf means shalem, and the others only have sliced bread, they must each, right, be given a piece of the loaf over which the bracha was made, and then they're going to eat, right, and they must eat it before continuing to eat their portions. Therefore, in this case, they have to wait until after the person making the bracha, meaning like this. If they needed me for everything else, right, not only the bracha, they needed me for the kiddush or they needed me for the bread, then they have to wait for me. So, for example, some people, right, because they want to have from the kos of bracha of kiddush, they want, there is an inyan, there is a concept, you're not obligated to, but there is an inyan. So therefore, right? No, mitzvah min mukhar, I apologize. Mitzvah min mukhar is just a taste, nothing to do with tasting from the kiddush of the balabait, right? There's another thing, right? But one more time. Mi'ikar din, a person is not obligated to drink at all the kiddush, right? You could do kiddush on Friday night. Nobody needs to drink. That is mi'ikar din. There is a chavivut of the mitzvah, right? Which means that there's something very nice and precious that everybody should drink. Now, when you have everybody should drinking, right? We did bring down when we spoke about hilchot kiddush. Is there an inyan to drink dafka specifically from the kos of the kiddush, or at the end of the day, everybody could also drink, and everybody's drinking. Everybody's drinking. They're having kiddush. There's no problem. Fine, right? 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Questions afterwards. 1 minute. So now what happens is, right? A person right now comes, right, and the balabait is giving over from the kos of the kiddush. So if everybody, it's a huge kiddush, and everybody's taking little cups, and they're not going to take from my cup, right? They're not going to take from the kos of the kiddush, but they're tasting from kiddush. So therefore, in such a case, they do not need to wait for me. Why? My berachav borei gefen the kiddush was motzi otam midei chova, and everybody came and they drank. If they want to take from my cup, meaning I already came and I drank, whether it's a drink or I put in a cup, and then they did, and then they want to take from here, now they have to wait for me. Why? Because once I make the kiddush and they're taking from me, it's not derech eretz, it's that they take before I take. I have to drink, and now you could drink. So all those people that want to come and wait for the kos of kiddush, they have to wait. The same halacha would apply to lechem mishneh. Nobody has lechem mishneh. If they have lechem mishneh, they can all do motzi on their own. Or even if I'm going to do the amutzi, it's a different thing. Why? Because they don't really need me. But if they need me, whether it's going to be because they're going to taste for my bread, or because of lechem mishneh, or whatever the case is, so therefore they have to wait for me, right? Why? Because now that they're using me not only for the beracha, but also for the actual bread, so therefore they have to wait for me. So for example, let's say we did like the Ramah, which was I cut it up, I don't even eat. I do a motzi, I cut up the bread, I give to everybody, right? and now I'm going to come and eat. Right? Now we learned, obviously, according to Shulchan Aruch, it's better that you eat first. But let's say I didn't do that. I did like the Ramah. Cut it up. They all have to wait for me. Because since they're waiting for me, right, the halacha is that they have to wait for me. They cannot come and participate for the bread. They cannot eat before I eat. I was the one that made the bracha. So here it says on Shabbat and Yom Tov meals, right? It's necessary to say the bracha v'mutzi while holding two whole loaves. Lechem mishneh. If each person has two loaves of his own, so they could eat, they could begin eating on their own. They have nothing to do. But if the one that was making the bracha has lechem mishneh, each one must first eat, right, a piece of bread from one of the two loaves, and only then they may eat his other bread. Therefore, no one may begin eating until after the person said the bracha has tasted the bread. So this is where we got to yesterday. Who was the one mentioned that used to wait for the rabbi? Oh, there was Mordechai. Yeah, the the minhag also in Toronto was that not everybody had their own breads. There was two big, huge loaves, right? And therefore, everybody used to do netilat yadayim. The rabbi used to come, he used to make the bracha, and then he used to give out to everybody from those two big loaves. You remember there was an inyan of having of even cutting both loaves or not. Do you have to cut both of lechem mishneh, or only one is enough? But basically, but it should be enough that in the loaves of the lechem mishneh should be enough for everybody, right? So now, for example, let's pretend right now we're in the Bet Knesset, right? So everyone usually does their own lechem mishneh, right? But he did mention about, whether it's in Shuva Yisrael, I mentioned in Toronto, right? They always, it was the Gadol, which was the rabbi, he was doing the bracha, and everybody was with Chovah with his. So for example, if I would do that, it's very difficult because if I'm doing it on small little buns and I would have to distribute to everybody, I don't have enough. So if I don't have enough to distribute to everybody, so if again, it's not the lechatchila, but the lechatchila is that everybody tastes from that lechem mishneh. So therefore, he comes and he says, if it is going to be that they're relying upon my beracha and also about the lechem mishneh, so nobody could begin eating until after the person actually came and he made the beracha, right, of the hamotzi. Okay. Halacha mem gimel. Okay, here we're talking about even in a case, afilu im kol echad mevarech leatzmo, 43, right? So even if it's going to be that everyone is going to make their own bracha v'motzi, kevan shekulam zukukim likakaro shel habotzea, since they are still, right, required for the kikara the botzea, em miderech hakavod litom kodem sheitomhu. So that's the reason. Meaning the reason why is because I mentioned it in Derech Eretz. Here he's saying it's the exact same thing. It's not kavod that it can't be that since they're waiting for him, so therefore in such a case it's disrespectful to come and start eating before him. He's the one that's doing it. Fine. Next halacha, mem dalet. This is also by Chazarat Hashatz. I didn't mention it this morning, but we will mention it. Meaning, right, that the person that's botzea is not supposed to be botzea until the majority of the people answer Amen. He doesn't have to wait for everybody because you know how it is. There's always people. There are people. Usually, some people are trigger happy, and then some people are. How do you call them? Late delay, right? It's like like a slow motion. You understand? So it's the funniest thing. I see it here every single day with Kaddish. They start Kaddish. You got the people that start Kaddish, and then always somebody starts afterwards, right? And then it's always like like it's a late reaction. You understand? It's always like that, right? The doctor there, he sees it every morning. Yeah. So what happens is that in such a case, right, you don't have to wait for everybody, but you have to wait for the majority. Majority. Right? So you wait for the majority. So as long as the majority of people they answered amen, now you could come and you could start, but he can't do it beforehand. So he says, "Mipnei shegam aniyat amen is part of the bracha. It's also part of the bracha. So therefore, he answered. He just said, the majority of people answer amen. Now you could cut the bread. So he says, "Aval hamiyut u'marichin yoter midai." But you've got the miyut that they come, they take too long. You don't have to wait for them. Shekol ha'marich ve'amen yoter midai don't elo toeh. Because opposite, if they're going to take too long for an amen, right? It's actually a mistake, right? I don't know if you ever saw the video of the Hazan Marokai, no? That he's coming and he's trying to prepare the next aliyah. So he takes the thing, he's for 20 minutes. So he could prepare the okay, fine, now let's go. You understand? Finally he's going to start.
Also, the Chazan has to wait till everybody say Amen.
The Rov. Again, it's always Rov.
It's always Rov.
Yeah. So he comes and he says, אבל מיעוט מעריכין יותר מדי אין צריך להמתין עליהם, שכל המעריך באמן אינו טועה. וכן אין צריך להמתין רק לאותם היוצאים ידי חובה בברכתו. The halacha is also that he only has to wait for the people that are actually going to be yitzei chova with his bracha. Because the one which are yitzei chova with his bracha, it's considered that when they answer amen, it's part of his bracha as well. Meaning, right, that means it's part of his bracha. אבל חלק מהברכה is only if they're being mitzvah chuvah. If they're not being mitzvah chuvah, some they're on the side, and now they're going to start answering amen later on, right? Or we have it sometimes with bar mitzvah boys. You always train the bar mitzvah boys when they go up to read the Torah, answer amen, and then you start the aliyah, right? So you have it all of a sudden that you have some boys that they're still in the bar mitzvah, so they could be 14, 15, 16. They want to read the parasha, right? And you're like, okay, fine, no. And he's looking for the place. Finally, he finds the place after a minute. Amen. He starts, that was already a minutoma. Why? We already passed the time. You understand? So again, obviously, right, you have to know the halachot of Amen. So he comes and he says here.
The shiur will be Shalom Alecha Rabbi?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, always. Yeah. So he comes now and he says like this. Halacha memhei. Habotzea. Okay. Poshet yado techila lekara leechol. Remember that until now we're talking about the butzea is always the one which is a gadol, correct? So now again, if he's a balabait, so he's the one that's doing it. If there's no balabait, for example, we're all eating a meal that we were all together with, right? So therefore, it would go after the tamid chacham. If there's no tamid chacham, it would go after the kohen. If there's no kohen, then it goes in the order of ages. So here, though, he comes and he says the one that obviously got the mutzi because he was the gadol or whatever the case was, right? So therefore, he's the first one also to eat as well. I'll read it in English. He says, if the central platter or bowl of food is right is food from which each person of the group is going to take a portion, the person who said the mutzi is given the honor of taking it first before everybody else. Why? Because מאחר שחלקו לו כבוד לברך תחילה ולצלול להוציא מצובין, ולכבד שיפשוט ידו לקערת תחילה. So the same thing you give him first. Meaning, since you're already mechabed oto in the bracha, obviously that means that he was the highest stature. So the same thing has to do with the food. So he gets the food first. Now, however, though, right, he comes and he says, right, if he wishes to give the honor to someone else, right, that's more distinguished, he may do so. Because since he was the one, so now it's his honor, right? So therefore he goes first. But he could be mechalek kavod now, right? And he could give it to somebody else. Okay? You remember we brought down that this is what the husband's supposed to do with the amutzi, with the serving of the plates. You remember we said in your house, right? You have your father-in-law and your father. So who does amutzi? Balabait. You should be mechabed your father. You should be no, but at the end of the day, you're the balabait. You know how much exactly bread there are, and therefore you know how much you're able to give out to everybody. So you do the amutzi. But now comes your wife; she's going to serve you. So you remember we brought down in the halachot. Who is she supposed to serve first? Her husband, her father, or your father? So we went and we said, what did he say? You, right? But now, technically speaking, you're going to receive the food. You have to respect your father, and you have to respect your father-in-law. So what should you do? So we said, she's going to offer you. You say, chavod. You give it to your father. Then she's going to offer who again? You again. So now you're going to pass it along to your father-in-law. And then it becomes you. And by doing that, you fulfill the halacha because she always has to give you first. Because the isha is mechabedet, right? She's obligated in the kavod of bala, yoter mi abba shelav, yoter mimcha. Right? Okay, fine. Bezat Hashem, one day we'll give it to the women as well. One day we'll give it to the women as well. But at least the men know it. At least the men know the halacha, huh?
It's good that we know that it should have been this way, but it was never this way.
Fine. Now you're going to learn, right? That's what you're learning. It's a life is a life is to learn.
Her father's at the table. You think she's going to serve you first?
Usually, yes. Yeah, and usually you're the one that has to pass it along to them. That's the way it is. Oh, okay, fine. That's something else then. Fine. Okay, let's go. Listen, Shalom Bay problems we'll speak afterwards, not in the middle of the shiur. Okay, let's go. Yeah. So he comes and he says like this. Halacha 46. Okay, Memvav. Kol hakavod. Wow.
29 minutes.
Huh?
It's getting 29 minutes of kavod.
He's rich. He's a millionaire. Collecting yeah, he's collecting mitzvot. What do you want? Yeah. Fine. He's connecting the daytime and the nighttime. Remember, with Torah. Yeah. Fine. Yeah. He comes and he says like this. Halacha 46. הבוצע לא ייתן מן הפה ביד האוכל, אלא מניח הפרוסה לפני כל אחד, והאכל נוטל הפרוסה בידו, והוא הדין בזה, גם לבניו הקטנים היכולים לקח הלחם שלפניהם. Okay? What does that mean? There's going to be, right, a lot of people, they know this halacha, but the question is like this. You just finished hamotzi. How do you give the bread to the people? Okay, so we'll speak about the throwing in a minute, right? But 1 minute. How do you give it? Can you give it to them in their hands? No, why not?
Mina.
Avelut. Okay, a lot of people say aniyut, but it's really be'emet avelut. What does that mean? Look at the next part. La'avelim yitena prusa biyad. Right? Remez adavar. Right? In a pasuk. Peresat Sion biyadea. Right? Shabbat lo yiten la'avelim biyad. Min shenavelu b'faretze b'Shabbat. So on Shabbat, anyway, you don't give to anybody, even if he's an avel. Because en avelu b'faretze b'Shabbat. So you don't give it to him in his hand. So therefore, right, the halacha is because of the avelim, right? We never give the bread directly to somebody's hand. Right? You always put it down and then they take it. Okay, and that's even for younger children. Doesn't matter who it is. You're always going to do it that way, right? Now, look in the footnote 200. This is the ruling of the Yalkut Yosef. Okay, apparently it's permissible to hand the bread to an infant who might not pick up the bread from the table in front of him. The halakha presented here applies only if the child is capable of picking up. Okay, obviously we're talking about a baby or whatever it is, or a very very young child. So you're going to give it to them in their hand. But if we're talking about that, that they can pick it up, the 4-year-old, 5-year, you let them pick it up. It's quite common for parents to hand sandwiches to their children. It might be that this is permissible. The halakha presented here applies only when a group recites a motzit together to begin a meal. Again, usually it could be if it's going to be a sandwich, and it could be that the entire thing is going to fall, and so it could be that that's going to be permitted. Now, right?
It's only to begin the meal.
Which one?
During the meal, I can. It's only the motzit part.
Well, until now, it sounds like yes, you're right, right? Even though, if I remember correctly, I think the people are makpidim on everything. Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah, that the kilu that they never want that siman bichlal, and therefore he never gives it to them.
General.
Like in general, you never give it to the people in there. Never hand bread to a person in his hand.
Specifically bread.
What? Yeah. Talking about bread. Talking
What
about
we
bread.
do is like we put on הבוצע bread, לוקח הרבה חתיכות and put it on a plate and then pass it to everybody.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Right? We did bring down though, well, but we brought down to the minhag, right, was to throw the bread. And you remember what we said about that?
כיסוי הלחם.
Yeah?
אומר, עושה את הלחם.
What do we say about throwing bread? You're allowed to throw bread?
It's like the
Kol hakavod. I remember the minhag of Morocco. Minhag was, huh?
You only have one student.
No.
We're an illusion.
I've got a student that's always here, right? And he's how do you call this? And he's paying attention. So
No, it's big attention.
yeah, what do you want? So listen carefully. Yeah. So what happened is as follows. Yeah. You have a scan over there. Yeah. So he comes and says like this. Yeah. You've got the concept as follows. Right? There is a concept of not throwing bread because of bizui ochlin. You're not allowed to throw bread or any food. Forget about bread, even other food. Right? You're not allowed to throw. Now, what happens is as follows. Right? Well, right now there was a minhag. I think majority of Moroccans, because I've seen that by everybody, that they used to come all my life, everyone.
I went
Throwing.
to New York. I
Yep.
went to New York once.
Throwing.
A bad Moroccan rabbi told me it's the biggest issue that I stopped doing it for a bit. And then I heard it again that we were supposed to throw it.
Right. So what's the reason for throwing it? So I was at the table in Gibraltar with Rabbi Friend. Rabbi Friend is one of the Rosh Yeshivot of Baltimore, Baltimore. And what happened was he went and he told us in the name of the Khatam Sofer or the Ktab Sofer, he told us this reason. And then afterwards I wanted to really see it. So I actually found it. It's brought down in the Piskei Teshuvot. The Piskei Teshuvot brings down because that was minhag even by Ashkenazim as well,
Right.
to throw it. Right? Because he was saying that it was the minhag.
You just throw it.
Yeah, no, we're not talking about football. We're not talking about that you're coming in, no football. But there was a minhag to throw. Yeah. So-
long table, you have to, no?
Yeah, okay, fine. But I'm saying, but it's not supposed to be that. It's not supposed to be like a game that you know what, I'm gonna, like you understand? It's not like that. So what was the concept? So the concept was, and that's what the doctor said, right? The table, right? Your shulchan is like the mizbeach, right? Because you remember that the Gemara says that once upon a time a person used to bring a korban on the mizbeach, and when you used to bring the korban in itself was already going to be an atonement. Nowadays that we don't have korbanot, what's the atonement? Your table. Because when you have people on your table, right, you have the guests on your table and poor people on your table, so therefore that's going to be your atonement. So nowadays your atonement is your table. And that's why there was a minhag, if you remember, that people used to use their table for their coffin. You never heard of that minhag?
I heard that.
There was a minhag that people would use their own table,
The wood.
right, the wood table of their table as a coffin, because that would actually be a protection for them, right? That would be a protection for them, that there was like a militz yosher. It's a good advocate for them, that look how much the mini mitzvot they did with their table, right? So they came, huh?
Bread that has a folding table.
Fine. Yeah. So what happens is now like this. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're gonna fold around them. Yeah. So now what happens is like this. Yeah. Are you listening? So now what happens is as follows. Yeah. So 1 minute. Fine. In Israel they don't, but other places, right? And everywhere in Chutzar, it's other than Gibraltar, they don't. Morocco, they bury directly or with the coffin.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Direct. Okay, so Morocco and Gibraltar. Morocco and
That's how they can coffin.
by the way, and it's a law. You're obligated to.
What?
Here also, I think
The
it's a
coffin?
law. Yeah, you're obligated to.
Gibraltar, no.
In Gibraltar, no, without coffin. Yeah, without. The only time that they. 1 second. So what happens is as follows. So what happens is that right now the one that's doing the Birkat Motzi, he's like the Kohen Gadol, and just like the Kohen Gadol used to throw the emurim on the mizbeach, which are the limbs and all the parts of the animals on the mizbeach, so too the balabait, which is the botzea, is like the Kohen Gadol that he's throwing the emurim on the mizbeach. Huh?
True.
1 second. And therefore, what happens is 1 second. So therefore, he says. So then, what happens is when he's going to throw it onto the what's it called, onto the mizbeach, so too you're allowed to throw it onto the table, and there's no problem. So that's the basis of why we used to throw the bread. That means you have to remember that the balabait is like a kohen gadol. Pashut, the mizbeach, right? The shulchan is a mizbeach, and he's throwing. Right, so he's copying what the Kohen Gadol did in the mizbeach. The shulchan is the mizbeach. That's why there should also be always salt on the table, right? For the shulchan, right? We spoke about getting salt for Suda Shlishit, right? Also the same thing. So there's always going to be salt on the table, right? But again, there's a concept of having also salt, just like al kol korban echad takriv melach. So the same thing, there should always be salt, right? And then what you do is that you're allowed to throw it because that was you're making a replica of what happened with the Kohen Gadol.